Okay, so our final speaker is Professor Glenn Thompson, who is an assistant professor at USF Geosciences, and he's going to kind of give us a background on why he got interested in studying volcanoes. So Glenn, take it away. And he has some cool props, too.
Thanks very much, Shannon. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm not sure if this will keep up to the excellent standards of the evening so far, but we'll see. So you can probably tell from the accent, I'm from England, and I came to the States first in 1998, actually to work with Steve. I've been here in Tampa Bay for the last 3 years. And I guess as scientists, we all have a specialization, and my specialization would be volcano-seismic monitoring, and what that means is monitoring the earthquakes and tremors that happen around a volcano, and that happens to be the best way to forecast volcanic activity. And it kind of relies on three things. First, it relies on having instrumentation, which is why I brought some instrumentation along with me tonight. It relies on the science of volcano-seismology, and it relies on having good software. So these three things are what you need to be able to do volcano-seismic monitoring well. It's not a science in itself, it's an application of these things. So I just thought something that would be easier for me to talk about tonight would be how I got involved in studying volcanoes. And now I think that probably a lot of people when they're kids have some kind of innate interest in volcanoes and in dinosaurs and in, I don't know, the stars, things like that. So it's not a very hard thing to have an interest in. But I never thought that I would end up studying this. I actually went to university to study astrophysics, and I think I kind of looked at doing a lot of different things after I came out of my first degree. And I was lucky to get to that point at all, because when I was 13, I had to make a decision between studying. Didn't go to a very good school. I had to make a decision between studying science and studying arts and music and language, which seems kind of ridiculously early to have to make that kind of choice. And naturally, I chose arts and language and music. That was what I chose to study at that age. And then there was a parents-teacher kind of meeting one evening, and my science teacher told my parents it would be a real shame if I didn't study science. I did actually come top of my class at science in school. And that changed everything for me. And it was a year or so after that I got really into astronomy and started working all kinds of jobs to earn enough money to buy a really nice telescope and go to university and study astrophysics. And that kind of led to everything that followed. A few years ago, I wrote to that science teacher. Apparently, he was extremely depressed and having a really hard time in life. And getting that letter from a student that he had taught so many years before really was very helpful. So I'm told by the school, and they had it on their wall for a very long time. So it's always good to pay back to your teachers. I think that's the lesson. All right, but how did I go from doing astrophysics to getting into volcanology? And the answer is I wanted to travel, and I saw an advert. So what happens in England is the professor will apply for funding to do a project, and then when they have the project money, they will then they will put out an advert for a student. And the catchphrase that I grabbed onto was, the student will gain field experience in Italy, New Zealand, and Indonesia. And that's exactly what happened. In the first year of this PhD program, I went to Stromboli, which was mostly what my project was about. I also went to Ruapehu in New Zealand, and I went to Mount Batur on Bali, which is probably just about the most beautiful place I've ever been. So I was extremely fortunate to do this project. But yeah, then the reality is that as a scientist, once you've done the really cool field work and everything, real life settles in, and it's mostly about trying to solve extremely complicated equations, doing a lot of modeling, doing a lot of programming in C and Fortran. Those were the kind of in vogue languages at the time. And it sat behind a computer while my professor kind of traveled the world, and I was sat home trying to do all this kind of stuff. And then something very momentous kind of happened in my life, which was when I got a phone call out of the blue from the British Geological Survey. And so we have the United States Geological Survey here, you'll know it very well, and they monitor a lot of volcanoes. But the British Geological Survey had absolutely no expertise in that area. This isn't something that they do because there are no volcanoes in Britain. And of course, Britain once had this massive empire across the world, but by 1995, there were these 13 very small islands around the world, and that was what was left, and they're called British Overseas Territories. And one of them had a volcano that erupted on my birthday in 1995. And so that island is called Montserrat. It's in the Eastern Caribbean arc, and so between Puerto Rico and Trinidad. And the figure kind of on the right there, that's a map of Montserrat that's taken quite recently. So you can see the deposits, all those gray things in the south of the island. In 1996, actually, when I first went out there, it looked absolutely nothing like that. The whole island was sort of verdant, lush rainforest, just absolutely beautiful. But the volcano kind of laid waste to the entire southern end of the island over a 15-year eruption from 1995 to 2010. Okay, let me just pop back a sec. So I got this call on a Tuesday, and the reason I got the call was basically because the British Geological Survey didn't have people to monitor volcanoes. They went trawling through all the university departments in Britain looking for anyone that did anything associated with volcanoes. I didn't really know anything about volcano monitoring, but I'd set up instruments on volcanoes, and so that's what made the connection. So I got the call on a Tuesday, and by Saturday I was on a plane out to Montserrat, and Sunday morning when I arrived, the first thing that happened was they walked me straight off the plane onto a helicopter. I'd never been on a helicopter before, and I'm trying to fasten myself into this seat. The seatbelt didn't actually work, so there was a piece of used duct tape that you had to tear off the seat in front of you, and to go over the buckle of the seatbelt, and then we took off and started flying around this extremely active erupting volcano. And I was sat in the doorway, and there were several people also in the back seat leaning across me to take pictures as we swooped from side to side around the volcano. And the one thing I didn't tell you yet is there were no doors on the helicopter. There were no doors because basically when you're out in the field, you want to be able to get in and out of the helicopter really fast. This is a really active volcano, and when you're in the field, you don't have time to sort of be opening a door and closing a door properly. Most likely, if you don't close it properly, it's going to be ripped off and thrown up into the rotor blades, and the helicopter will come straight down in a fiery mess. So that is not what you want to do. So that was quite an experience, landing in Montserrat, just getting off the plane after traveling all night, never being in a helicopter before, and seeing this extremely active volcano. It was kind of a white knuckle ride. Anyway. So this is what flying around that lava dome looks like. I've got a few clips here, a few video clips. And what's really cool about these video clips, at least for me, is they were all shot right there during my first experience on this volcano. So it was kind of the mecca at the time for volcanologists around the world. We're descending on this erupting volcano. And so were news crews, and so were documentary crews. And there was a crew out there from the Discovery Channel, and they shot all of this footage. And what's really cool too is that I reconnected with these people earlier today. Maybe I'll try and remember to bring that point up again later on. So this is what flying around the. Oh well, maybe this would definitely work earlier. This is my. So you probably can't hear the commentary. It's not really important. I could probably let you hear it if I put the.
That growth rate must be way up there with the world record.
Maybe not. But anyway, this is a lava dome, and you see it looks nothing at all like what Liz was talking about, which is a Hawaiian eruption. It's a very steep-sided. Actually, what you saw just there, we'll see a little bit more of in a minute. That was the pyroclastic flow that Liz was mentioning. So you've got this very viscous lava that's coming out of this volcano, far, far more viscous than anything that happens at Hawaii. And it can't flow very easily. So this stuff is continually erupting, and it just builds up this steep-sided lava dome. And it's very, very unstable. And it's also very, very hot. Not hot enough to glow in the day like the lava in Hawaii is, but it's still like 900 degrees centigrade. And parts of this are continually collapsing away in these pyroclastic flows. So these pyroclastic flows, they're these, you basically have a block that falls off the dome, but this block is extremely hot and full of lots of gases. And as it starts to tumble down the side, it breaks up. And what you mostly get is a hot a flow of ash and gas swooping down the side of the volcano. And it's the most lethal thing that a volcano does, far, far, far more lethal than a lava flow. So at night, it's also very beautiful. So you can't see it glowing during the day. But at night, you can see it very clearly. So we used to spend hours just at night watching which parts of the volcano were active. So the dome would sometimes grow out in one direction, and then a day later, it would switch into a different direction, wherever the path of least resistance was. And you could obviously see which parts were active by which areas were glowing the most. That was the hottest, the most newest part of the lava dome. Okay, now this is I want to show you here a little bit. It'll help you understand a little bit how volcanic domes grow. And what this is one image per day taken from a fixed camera location. So these cameras take one image per minute. But I'm not showing you every minute because at least 95% of the time, the volcano is shrouded in clouds. If you were to watch the weather patterns over the over the volcano, it basically generates its own clouds because it's pushing the air mass up, and this is very moist air coming off the Atlantic Ocean, and the volcano also has all of these particles that help water to condense, and so it almost always has a cloud over the top of it, which is remarkable also for some of the video imagery that Lauren Miller was able to get, because she didn't get too many cloudy days. So one image per day. Someone went through and selected the best image per day over several months. And obviously the cloud patterns are shifting around a lot, but you can if you watch it closely, you can see parts of the dome kind of growing up. Just getting taller and taller. Now we're going to kind of look a little bit more at a pyroclastic flow. So Montserrat's relatively small and steep, and the pyroclastic flows would frequently go into the sea and build new land onto the island. And of course, this is part of why the island is there in the first place.
Moments later, the regenerated dome collapses. The observatory warns all field teams of tremendous seismic activity as tons of rock crash through the ice.
So we have a huge ash plume here going up to about 6 kilometers and pyroclastic flows coming down the sides of a volcano. And I saw things like this happening almost daily when I was out there. The volcano was going through this incredible acceleration in activity. Most of the people, most of the scientists that had been working out there for the previous several months thought the eruption was over. It was erupting at about 0.5 to 1 cubic meters per second. But Caribbean volcanoes generally have their largest eruption very early on, and then they sort of get quieter and quieter. So most of the so-called experts thought that this eruption was done. But what actually was happening was it was just escalating and getting worse and worse. It actually continued to get worse and worse, at least for the next year, and then it carried on for another 13 years or so after that. So this was very unexpected when it was happening. So we see this flow going out into the sea. Sometimes I would see flows going out 2 miles into the sea. And you would see, Steve was talking about lightning before, we would see lightning happening in the ash cloud above the sea as the pyroclastic flow went out into the ocean. It was mesmerizing to see. And some of these events, I was possibly the only person that ever saw them. I just happened to be on the right side of the volcano when they happened. Another thing that happens is when this pyroclastic flow goes into the sea, it throws up a lot of moisture, steam into the air. So the seawater starts to boil. And when all of this seawater gets up into the air, Steve was talking earlier about, he mentioned something called accretionary lapilli, and this is when you get moisture thrown, like raindrops are up in the air, and ash starts to collect in them, and the particles get bigger and bigger and bigger. So several times when I was out there after a pyroclastic flow, you would be bombed out by these accretionary lapilli. They're like hailstones, ash hailstones that come down maybe this big, and you have to kind of run for cover because they're quite painful when they fall on you. Okay, so that was kind of a long sequence here. She was mentioning how when the waves come into this new beach area, the waves are actually evaporating before they go back out into the sea, because that new fan is extremely hot. And another thing is that the ash clouds would often blacken out most of the island, because when the ash has fallen, you can't see anything. So it's extremely dangerous. So this is a common observation post called the Viewpoint Hotel, and the swimming pool right now is just completely full of ash because you've got this huge ash cloud that went up from this pyroclastic flow, and we're all being completely bombed out. And it's kind of an ugly mess. This would happen almost every day. You would just get new ash fall. You try and clean everything up, like clean up your house or wherever you were living, and then the next day you had to do it all over again. I mean, I've seen, I've been in Alaska when there've been, a fine dusting of ash from, say, Redoubt volcano in 2009, and it shuts down the airport, and it causes a mass hysteria, really, because when it happens for the first time, it's a big deal. In Montserrat, this happened virtually every day that I lived there, and one time we had 5 inches of ash in the main town. And this stuff, obviously, it's not like snow. It's not going to melt. It just continues to hang around, and it gets wet, and then the roofs will collapse, and then it dries out again, and it's just blowing around in the air constantly. It's a total nightmare, and it's in your lungs, it's in your eyes. You can feel it crunching between your teeth wherever you go. So, I mean, this is a kind of a wild experience. And then what I'm really coming to now, this is really where I specialize. This is the operations room. Now, Steve is very much in this area too. So this is the operations room in Montserrat in 1996. And we have a much nicer operations room in Montserrat now, but this was just a house at the time. We were just scrambling to get whatever accommodation we could. Oh, never mind. Let's try that again.
At the volcano observatory, the School of Seismic Activities.
So you'll probably recognize this instrument right here. This is called a helicorder, and that's me on my first assignment, and looking at the drum records that you pull off of this instrument. And then there's a scientist there, Venus, who's looking at the earthquakes that are being recorded by the volcano.
This pyroclastic flows we've seen, a strange new earth tremor has developed.
So some of the signals, it's kind of, whoops, I don't know what that was. So is the mouse, no, the mouse, okay. These signals here, these are from pyroclastic flows. And this is almost certainly from a large kind of dome collapse happening right here. So in the operations room, the most important thing is that we provide two-way radio backup to everybody working in the field. So whenever that we have this large exclusion zone which is supposed to contain all of the pyroclastic flow activity that could happen, but the scientists have to go in there all the time to make observations, to set out instrumentation, maintain instrumentation. So it was absolutely critical that whenever they go into those places, usually with helicopter support, that they have two-way radio communication with us, because we're looking at the seismic data continuously. So this is real-time volcano-seismic monitoring. And so this is probably my favorite signal of all. It's called Bandit Tremor. And what this is so you can see there are, on the helicorder here, this is a 24-hour record. And each time this drum rotates, that's 15 minutes. So each line is 15 minutes apart. And you can see these bands of high amplitude signal. And we call this banded tremor. Tremor is really just any signal that is continuous, high amplitude. And when you take these pieces of paper off the drums and unwrap them and stick 2 or 3 days together, you can see how these bands are kind of persistent. And each of these bands is something called an earthquake swarm, where the events get so close together that they overlap. And these are, this is why, so these are, when you take these drum records and you kind of sift through all the different types of seismicity that happen on a volcano like Montserrat, it's so much more interesting than looking at tectonic earthquakes. So when we look at tectonic earthquakes, the regular kind of earthquakes that you hear about in the news, they're larger than these signals, larger amplitudes, but these are, I think, much more interesting because they're really telling you something diagnostic about the volcano and giving you some idea about what's happening. So this first signal here is a regional earthquake, your signal up here. But on volcanoes, what happens is you still get those same signals, but they tend to swarm. That means there's lots of similar events happening in a short period of time. And this is usually happening when there's some great change going on within the volcano. Now, this is a high-frequency earthquake swarm. And then you get these lower-frequency earthquake swarms where the signals are like, they're extremely regular. And they can go on, I think this particular swarm went on for 3 days, an event every few seconds. And what this signifies is when magma is coming out of the ground, so the lava dome itself is growing at some rate. And when you see swarms, you know that the volcano is probably doing something really nasty. And the other thing is when you see tremor, you know that the volcano, these are the main precursors. These are the things we mostly look out for as indicators of increases in escalations in the volcanic activity. And then we just finish off by looking at these signals at the bottom here. And this is a mud flow signal. So you've probably seen lahars coming up, in videos like St. Helens and things like that, sweeping bridges away. These are smaller mud flows, but they're still a hazard. And these are rockfall and pyroclastic flow signals. And sometimes pyroclastic flow signals, they happen one after another. The entire dome, which might be up to 200 million cubic meters of material, will collapse away over a period of a few hours. You'll get one big pyroclastic flow about every 5 minutes. And so these signals are all precursors of, they're telling you that something bad is going to happen. And these signals are all telling you that something bad is happening right now. And so a lot of my work is actually focused on trying to detect these signals as they happen, write software systems that will pick these things up and will alert scientists and, you know, sort of quantify these things. It's all about letting scientists know as soon as possible when these things are happening, how big they are, and you know, getting this kind of information out so that lives can be saved. I mean, even you've seen the pyroclastic flows on Montserrat. They may take 3 or 4 minutes to reach the sea. They may also take 3 or 4 minutes to reach populated areas. But that 3 or 4 minutes can be really vital. We can have, you know, we had systems that could tell us when pyroclastic flows were coming to the north, and we could warn people, and we would sound sirens, and they would know to listen to the radio. And we would jump in over any live, we'd do a live radio broadcast and warn people to get out of the valleys, you know, get to higher ground, because of course the flows are concentrated in the valleys. So real-time volcano-seismic monitoring, that's what my work is mostly about. And if anybody wants to come up here afterwards and look at the instrumentation that we use, this is stuff that we've used at several volcanoes. We also use it at Kennedy Space Center. Just very quickly, we have infrasound sensors which record low-frequency sound waves. So this will tell you when a volcano is erupting, because there's no sound waves until it starts, till stuff's actually in the atmosphere. But we also have seismometers. So these are the kind of state-of-the-art seismometers that we use to pick up the activity I've been talking about. Thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Any questions for Glenn?
Yeah, so Christine is asking about the pyroclastic flows that were observed going a couple of miles out to sea. And I only saw this happen a couple of times, going that far. So when you had a really, really large dome collapse and you are, so over a period of a couple of hours, the pyroclastic flows get progressively larger and have longer and longer runouts, because you're excising deeper and deeper into the dome. And as you get deeper into the dome, you're exposing higher and higher pressure material. And there's a more explosive component to the pyroclastic flow, and it can travel further. Of course, the heavy material, at the base of a pyroclastic flow, there are all these big rocks still kind of rolling around. But you can't really see them because of the turbulent ash cloud that's billowing above it. It's the ash cloud that travels across the ocean, and the rocks just pile straight down into the sea. So the question was, how do you read these drum records? So I don't know if you guys can see the mouse cursor here on the left-hand side. So this is where the sort of day begins. This is when you put the piece of paper on the drum. And then there's a motor that drives the drum around, rotating it every 15 minutes. And there's another motor that just moves the pen downwards, sort of, and so the whole thing traces out a helix, a spiral. And so you're reading it from left to right, but you're also reading it around. And so when you're looking at something like this, you're reading it like a book. You're going from left to right along the lines. Well, each sheet should be 24 hours. That was the speed that we ran it at. So 15 minutes around, and so that would be 96 lines. You've got 24 hours in the day, 4 lines per hour. Yeah.
Is that 3 days on the right?
I think it's 3 days, yes, Steve. I think that's a 3-day. I basically just sellotaped together a bunch of those plots. Anybody else? That's a really good question, actually. A lot of data in our community is completely open these days. Like the the USGS volcano observatories in Alaska, Hawaii, the Cascades. There's a lot of volcanoes that we monitor in the US. That data all goes to IRIS, well, most of it goes to IRIS, which is they archive all that data and make it accessible to all researchers so that, we can get the best bang for the buck from the research, tax-paying dollars that support all of this science. It doesn't really help us, any of us, if that data is locked away. Of course, there is an extra side to that, though, which is that the scientists who actually collect the data have a big stake in it, and it's important to involve them in any research. The data from Montserrat is a different question. It's not really open access. I have a lot of the data myself. I'm not allowed to share it because I'm not the observatory. But yeah.